This is the Enragé, a show where we take a deeper dive into written works published at the Center for a Stateless Society. Join us as we give voice to the ideas challenging the vain phantoms that haunt our social reality and stand in the way of total liberation. For more information, visit c4ss.org. And to support this show or any of the other projects happening at the center, please visit patreon.com/c4ss.org. Thank you for listening. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Enragé. I'm your host, Joel Williamson. Today we'll be joined by Jaimine to discuss an article they wrote titled Social Statism Called Caste. Without fearing the consequences, Jaimine writes boldly on a variety of topics such as culture, hindutva, and economics. Jaimine made a political splash after spray painting "Taxation is theft" on public walls in Mumbai, India, and was even interviewed by mainstream media in regards to the spectacle. He is currently in the process of completing his PhD in politics. Jaimine, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joel, for having me here. I really like listening to your podcast, and I'm glad that you are connected with C4SS, Center for a Stateless Society. And I'm very much obliged to talk about caste factor, especially for the audience on your side who is not so well versed with the caste factor, although there have been some recent cases reported in US about it.
Right. Yeah, I'm excited to jump into this too, and very happy to have you on as well. So starting out, your C4SS bio says that you used to be an anarcho-capitalist, but have since moved away from the label. What was the reason for that, and how did you become political to begin with?
That's a very good question, but it's like change is a law of universe, and I've always been curious. I have been celebrating libertarian tradition for last 11, 12 years, and I have been always been fluid in this regard. And, around 2012-13, I got interested in reading more about libertarianism in depth. So ideologically, I shifted towards, the right-wing libertarianism, which was very extreme for me, and anarcho-capitalism as it's commonly known. So I was introduced to the literature of Murray Rothbard, Friedrich Hayek, and, David Friedman and all. So it fascinated me. I became truly an anarcho-capitalist. Although, it's not in sync with the ground reality. Although theoretically it may make sense, especially to the right-wing libertarians. But then I realized the global changes, the geopolitical changes, especially in US, around my South Asian continent, and I realized how this particular ideology is indirectly also responsible for the right-wing extremism. Just like how we saw the rise of Trump, we saw the rise of Modi out here, even in Brazil, Turkey. So somewhere I think this particular ideology could directly or indirectly be responsible for such form of extremism. So I introspected and I realized that it has no moderated version, So I toned down a bit and I reflected a lot. And 2 years back, I converted to religion of Buddhism, and it has helped me a lot to become more empathetic. And that's how I became more critical of my own past and all these ideologies. So somewhere I believe that my ideological association with anarcho-capitalism is also, a bit in tandem with paleo-libertarianism, which I have talked about in this blog. That has shocked me because when I spoke certain groups in my circles, when I was an anarcho-capitalist, I realized that these folks are not able to digest certain important social issues that continue to haunt Indian society, and that is caste. And Buddhism has been a very casteless religion, so it has shaped my consciousness towards it. So that's how my journey has been, Joel.
Thanks for sharing that. That's really interesting. As we mentioned in your intro, you got some attention for tagging a public building. Why did you choose "Taxation is theft" as your political message with that? And what was it like for you receiving a fair amount of attention as a result?
So as I was leaning more towards anarcho-capitalism then, and I was fascinated by Ron Paul. So his ideas about taxation, calling taxation as theft, really fascinated me. He was not the first person to say it so. So especially in India, we don't talk about it. I mean, these topics are still stigmatic. Not many people are well versed with the wider understanding of the liberal side of the economics. So I thought to talk about taxation is tough because this philosophy altogether questions the very moral character of the government, the way the taxes are collected at gunpoint. So somewhere the government has to be questioned on its ontological factors. In US, you will find people talking about liberty or libertarianism. I mean, the whole US Constitution was founded on that way, but Indian Constitution wasn't. And I was also associated with a social research organization 4 5 years back, and it was leaning towards the idea of liberty. So I just happened to do this graffiti, on the public walls. I did 3 to 4 times this graffiti on the public walls around midnight, and luckily I escaped the police. I mean, so I was also featured by the media organizations. It's pinned on my Twitter account, and just a Google search about it can also fascinate my listeners about it, because this is something altogether very new. Although it didn't take the highest momentum, as I was anticipating, because I was not being steady about it. But somewhere I think it's important to question things pertaining to government, especially how the government can become very statist. And if the government is not questioned or not made accountable over its things, then democide becomes very possible.
Got it. Cool. So, what inspired you to write about the caste system in India?
There are many factors, actually. I was born in a Hindu family, and my family continues to be a Hindu. So Hinduism is one of the oldest, religion as it is assumed. So Hinduism is nothing but aggregation of caste, frankly speaking. So seeing the right wing government in power since 2014, it consolidated hate. It consolidated hate crimes against minorities, and I was not economically or socially in agreement with this. And somewhere, as I told you earlier, that I have always been fluid, in my thought processes. I have been atheist in the past. So Buddhism as a religion appeased me and appealed me. And, I just left my former religion, which is nothing but aggregation of caste, and adopted a religion which has no caste. So caste is, I'm not sure how many Americans out there know about it, but recently there was this book by Isabel Wilkerson on caste, and she's a Pulitzer winner of in 90s. So she draws a good comparison and analogy on color, that is racism and caste. So after having adopted Buddhism and after having read about Dr. Ambedkar, who is the architect of Indian Constitution, who also led the Dalit Buddhist movement in 1950s. So it fascinated me altogether. So Hinduism altogether never satisfied me. So I became a casteless person. So I identify myself more like a Buddhist. And Buddha himself was against the system of caste. There have been many discourses of Buddha with the untouchables of those times. So basically, this whole caste structure is based on purity and pollution. And it is one of the oldest social dictatorship, I would say. So there are basically five types of caste. The first is on the top hierarchy, Brahmin, who is basically a priest or a scholar. Second is a Kshatriya, who is basically a warrior. Third is Vaishya, who is basically a trader or an entrepreneur. The fourth is Shudra, who is basically an artist or a worker. And the last is Atishudra or Avarna, which is untouchable, which doesn't fall in this four particular caste categories. As discussed in the article, caste as a element has been determined by two factors. The first is Jati, the second is Varna. So Jati is, determination of caste on the basis of birth, and Varna is on the basis of occupation. So the whole mythological, understanding of Hinduism has been grounded and found on the basis of caste structure. So this is something very hierarchical, and it has no scope of mobility. And considering my own nature, which is highly anarchic, and I do not have any, what do you say, obeisance or infatuation for following the laws or the rules as such, because this caste structure is almost like the governmental system, just like how the government holds the monopoly over laws, guns, and violence. Similarly, the caste structure is hierarchical, it's like I cannot be born as a Brahmin, just because I am born in a particular caste in this particular timeline. And there is no scope of me converting my caste into another, right? I can convert myself to any other religion, but it's technically not possible for me to convert my caste into another caste. So, who is determining my caste? Who has given the authority to somebody to decide on my behalf that I follow so and so? So, this is almost like a social contract system that we talk in political science, right? And we all know what are the consequences of social contract. And it doesn't leave the scope of mobility, socialization, and liberty. And it destroys the very fabric of equality and fraternity. So caste is, I call it as a social statism. So social is basically because it is more cultural, it is more religious, it has to do with our social living, because caste destroys the social capital of the individuals. So that's why I call caste as a factor of social statism. And statism is something very dangerous. We all know the history of how statism has destroyed people, how it has destroyed the liberties, and it continues to do so. So caste is something that we should be talking about, and I'm glad that Joel, you invited me in your show to talk about it, because I want more listeners of C4SS or all those left-wing anarchists to talk about it, because we are all on the same page when it comes to application of critical race theory. So similarly, we have to be talking about caste consciousness so that more and more people move out of this religion that continues to degrade them, because caste is graded inequity. So this is something that has made me more radical, made me more fundamental, and that's why I've been often accused on Twitter and elsewhere of being Hinduphobic just because I call out the caste. But this is not the first time, and this won't be the last time.
Flattered to have you on, and I'm really glad that we're going to be able to explore this topic as well. I mean, I'll be honest, my understanding of Hinduism did not include an understanding of caste. Is it possible that my watered down interpretation of the whole thing was sold to me by people who are in the upper caste of what Hinduism is, or is it just lazy Western interpretation on my part?
Yeah.
What do you think? Why do you think the majority of people don't see Hinduism as necessarily political, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I get you. I mean, it's not your fault that you live on the other side of the world, and most often, the Westerners have a very different picture of Hinduism. It's mostly about yoga, masala, all the what you call spices, and Taj Mahal as such. But I think there is a lot about Hinduism. If you just dig up the history of Hinduism, there are many sides to this coin. We have been always been told about a particular side, but why is that we don't talk about caste, right? Why is that we don't talk about the intolerance of Hinduism towards Buddhism and Jainism? So I have written this blog, The Resume of Hindutva. For the listeners who want to read this, they can just DM me on Twitter, and I can help you connect with that blog, in which I have, using references, talked about how Hinduism has been violent, okay, towards its own people, especially the oppressed communities, right? We are seeing the ramifications of it. People often tell me that no, caste doesn't exist anymore. That's because they are belonging to the privileged caste. If you talk to the people who belong to the unprivileged caste, they will obviously not agree with the privileged caste. The thing is that the privileged caste have been able to transform their caste capital into modern capital. That is not the case with the unprivileged caste. So that's why you will find all the people belonging to lower caste community who are known as Dalits and Bahujans, or even Adivasis, leaving Hinduism and turning to Islam, Christianity, or even Buddhism. So this is something which is kind of a marketplace of ideas. That's how we talk in economics, if you know it. So this all religions have become competitive to Hinduism, so that you have social capital to mobilize, to socialize. Because if you are determined, on the basis of caste by your birth, and then by your occupation, because that is more intersectional, then it is something very problematic, right? And I think in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you some stunning and staggering data, which will really shock listeners about certain things, that how your profession on the basis of caste also degrades your autonomy and self-respect, Joel.
Right. There's a few things in there that I definitely want to touch on a little later. Before we get too deep, though, I want to see if I could have you expound on the difference between class and caste. So the difference between a class system and a caste system is sometimes identified by whether an uneducated person can achieve higher wealth status with sheer hard work and determination. Class systems are supposed to allow for this sort of thing, this sort of upward mobility, whereas caste systems do not. What social factors contribute most towards the distinction between these two systems?
Yeah, that's a very important question because people should know about the features and characteristics of caste and class. So before we jump to the intersectional relationship between both, let us understand in a very simple way what exactly these terms are. So in the system of class, you have this upper class, middle class, lower class, right? And in the system of class, you have chances, you have choices to make, and there is almost, the difference between making people and attempting to make them equal, So equality of opportunity and equality of outcome are all discussed in the system of class. So if you have access to modern capital or financial capital or political capital, you can mobilize from upper class to lower class and vice versa. Although, we also have a class warfare, right? That's altogether a different story. That's altogether a different issue, which I think we should also be talking about. But, let's emphasize on caste here. And in the system of caste, a lower caste cannot become an upper caste because a religion says so. And it has been justified in the so called holy texts like Manusmriti, Rig Veda, where caste has been justified. And there are anthropological, and cultural ramifications of caste on the individual as well as societies. And this is something not new. Often the privileged caste come with the accusation that the Britishers, who ruled India for last 200 years, are responsible for creating the caste structure because the Portuguese came to India 500 years back and they introduced this term called caste. So the casta is a Portuguese term, but that's true. But I think even before the Portuguese, we have been living in the system of caste because that's how the Hindu society has been cherishing. So as I told you, that Hinduism is nothing but aggregation of caste. So it is only after the British organizing the census, the caste organization happened. So initially in ancient India, as I talked about Buddha, who also has encountered untouchables like Matangi, Prakrit, Sunit, Upali, and there is an anti-caste discourse of Buddha with these people. So it really tells that the caste in India has been too old. So this has nothing to do with the class. Nowadays, because of the modern corporate lifestyle, etc., people are becoming class conscious as well. But it is important to understand the intersectional relationship between class and caste. So it's like, if I'm belonging to an upper caste, I may have a good amount of options to socially mobilize in the class factor. I may have access to the modern capital, etc. Yes, there may be some people who are poor in the upper caste, but comparatively, they have the scope of converting the currency of caste capital into modern capital, which is not the case with the lower caste. So, this is something that not many people understand. So, in class structure, you can transform yourself into any way depending upon your choices, enterprising, service, hard work, etc. But in caste structure, no matter how smart you are belonging to that particular caste. So if those who want to talk about it or those who want to know more about it, they can just go to Google and just read more about Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Mahatma Jyotirao Phule, Savitribai Phule, Ayoti Thas, and these are some anti-caste thinkers as well. They are just not social reformers or writers. So I think a lot of research has to be done so that more people get to know the dangerous and the perilous side of the caste, which continues to haunt even us, even in 21st century, Joel.
Right. I've heard it said that there are these narratives that even the quote untouchables internalize, which helps to promote the continuation of the caste system. And it goes something along the lines of, well, we have to have a caste system because if someone from a higher caste wants to be of a lower caste or the other way around, then, there needs to be options for people. So it's pitched as sort of the exact opposite of what it is, as a rationalization for its perpetuation. You argue that the caste system not only happens through the state politically, but perpetuates itself culturally through religion and everything else. So, what are some other examples of these types of cultural reinforcements of the caste system?
Yeah, Joel, I think this is a much needed thing to talk about actually and very openly. So let me be bold enough to talk. Let's say the example of a particular caste called Chandala or the Dome. So these are the social groups based in India. who, according to the caste structure prescribed by the Hinduism, have to resort only to the crematorium activities. Okay, so crematorium activities in Hinduism plays a huge role, especially for the upper caste who benefit a lot. Now I'll tell you how. So, for example, I want to bury a dead body. Okay, so Hinduism believes in burying a dead body into the corpse of fire, etc. So, the particular caste is assigned to do that. So, a Brahmin priest who is belonging to the upper caste would be invited, and a person who is a Chandala who is belonging to the lower caste would also be invited. So, the upper caste out there would utter some religious verses or Sanskrit verses, okay, that is almost like guaranteeing you to the heaven. Okay, and this person will make around 200 to $300. I'm talking in your currency language, which is around 20 to 25,000 out here. Whereas if you talk about the Chandala and the Dome caste, they make up meager, it's like $5. So the actual work is done by the crematorium worker belonging to the Chandala and the Dome caste, right? They are taking the risk, especially in the current time. That is the ongoing pandemic of coronavirus. These are the current rates. Okay, so for those listeners, let me inform you that currently they are charging around 200 to $300 just for uttering some verses, whereas the real job is done by the crematorium worker who takes all the risk to bury this COVID related body, and it's making just $5 to $7. So this is something in the current scenario. So you can see the class warfare as well, right? So you will not find this particular caste belonging to the lower group having the chances of mobilizing upward. So this is a kind of an economic sanction on the basis of the caste. So this is keeping poor people poorer. So that's how you want to maintain control. So this has been not new, okay? This has been historic for 3,000 years, and that's how people have been kept poorer. So you can easily identify people on the basis of skin color, on the basis of their identity, individuality, and this is quite visible in Indian society. And the other example I would give you is of the manual scavenging. You cannot imagine in India today there are 66,000 people who belonging to a particular caste group called Valmiki community, and they are graded in the lower caste community. Okay, and officially there are 66,000 manual scavengers. So what is exactly manual scavenging is? It is about cleaning the excreta, the human excreta or the dry toilets with your hands. Okay, and there is no modern technology for that. And there have been many cases of manual scavenging dying from the gas fumes. Okay, and out of which 80 to 90% of these manual scavengers are married women. Okay, so there is also an intersectional relationship between caste and gender, not just class. And you will have the highest amount of manual scavengers, around 35,000, based in Uttar Pradesh, which is the role model of the Hindutva or the Hindu Rashtra movement that India is experiencing currently. So why is that we don't find a Brahmin doing a crematorium activity? Why is that we don't find a Brahmin doing a manual scavenging activity? Right. So it is basically religiously prescribed and culturally prescribed. So recently, the certain fringe elements belonging to the right wing government have taken some steps by letting a Dalit or a Bahujan become the priest. But that does that change the caste equation in the society? It is merely political tokenism or to show off conspicuously that how religiously tolerant you are, but that's not the case. If you check the NCRB, that is the National Crime Records Bureau of the 2019 report, it has concluded that India is not safe for the Dalit and tribal girls. So why is that the lower caste women are is more vulnerable and prone to caste-based sexual crimes? Right? I'm not justifying sexual crimes as such. It is wrong in any sense. But why is that? The NCRB report says that Dalit and tribal girls, the Adivasi groups, which are highly untouchables, are prone to sexual exploitation, right? And Uttar Pradesh being the worst. This is not something that I'm making on my own. This is something which is available online. This is something which I am speaking from the observation of my news and facts, right? I'm pretty sure many people out there who belonging to the podcast would be offended listening to this, but this is the case. And I have a standpoint experience on this. I have a lived experience in this. So there are certain tough questions which they won't be able to answer. For example, on Twitter, I often ask this question to the upper caste that, amidst the untouchable status, how do I become a Brahmin? Right. So right now I am an untouchable by my caste. So how do I become a Brahmin? So what is the process? They are come out with all those weird theories, that I have to become a scholar, or maybe by my varna, that is by occupation, I am a professor, so I am already a Brahmin. But does that give me the access to social capital? Does that improve and enhance my caste status? So these are some things, which will really affect their cognition, but it doesn't matter because the time has come for us to smash this caste, just like how we want to smash the government with the guns and the laws.
Just a heads up for folks who are not interested in hearing graphic descriptions of this sort of thing, now might be a good time to tune out or skip ahead of this section of the interview because some of this obviously is graphic. Just a heads up on that. But yeah, I just wanted to say this before I have you expound on another topic. So yeah, you mentioned violence against women. Can you expound on the relationship between patriarchy and the caste system in India?
Yeah, sure. I think this is something that we should be talking about. So I've written some few interesting articles on caste and compatibility, that how the caste system is responsible for the development of arranged marriage system, which is intra-caste, or you can say endogamy, right? And the opposite is exogamy, which is intercaste. So, every 10 years we have the census data. So 2011, okay, which is very recent, the case of endogamy was around 94%. And the case of exogamy, that is intercaste marriage, that is intercaste is when a person of one particular social group is marrying somebody of another social group. So that is exogamy. And the data of exogamy was just 6%. And India has a population of 1.3 billion. So out of 1.3 billion, imagine only 6% are doing intercaste. So why are we talking about intercaste marriage, right? And how does it affect gender a lot? So I'll be talking about few things in this regard. See, the first thing is in Hinduism, there is a system called Anuloma and Pratiloma. So Anuloma and Pratiloma is a system which was created to discourage upper caste women marrying a lower caste and vice versa. Okay. So if a lower caste man marries an upper caste woman, there are social repercussions. Okay. Even today in 21st century, honor killing is very much normalized. So all those listeners, you can just Google this honor killing to know more about how, women making her own agency, women making her own choice to marry outside the purview of her caste can invite violence, wrath. India is talking about democracy. We identify ourselves as the world's largest democracy. But democracy of whom? Dr. Ambedkar made this point quite clear when India was winning independence in the year 1947 that India is going to enter the age of contradictions. We can have political democracy, but then it won't be sustainable because there is no social democracy. And why we cannot have social democracy? Because of the caste factor, right? So caste also has its intersectional relationship with gender, and caste affects women a lot. So, 4 5 years back, Jack Dorsey of Twitter, he came to India. He had this poster on his hand, which went viral and created a lot much controversy in India. And that poster was "Smash Brahminical Patriarchy." So, Brahminical patriarchy is what do you say? It's a Hindu philosophy, okay, which is not so conceptualized religiously, but it is directly, indirectly known through the text of Manusmriti and Rig Veda that how caste affects the woman's agency. So, Brahminical patriarchy, the word Brahminism, as known, it belongs to the upper caste, and patriarchy is something which is completely anti woman, right? It is completely transphobic. So, Brahminical patriarchy affects women in general. Okay, so the upper caste have been known for controlling women agencies, which ultimately trickles down to the other social groups. And it all leads to imitation of all the activities that the upper caste men undertake by controlling and suppressing women, which eventually affects the lower caste a lot, right? As I talked about the caste based crimes, so Brahminical patriarchy is something which disempowers the woman's agency. We may have been talking about representation since 1950s. Initially, we started with political representation, and today we have to think twice about giving women some political representation. Even in those structure, you will have upper caste women dominating the representation. You will not have lot many Dalit and the Bahujan voices in this 33 so-called 33% of political representation. So basically, even when you talk about democracy or so-called liberalism, the upper caste continue to visibly and invisibly control the economy of society. So that's a thing to look at it. So, let me highlight the example of Savitribai Phule. Savitribai Phule was a teacher, okay, and she was born in an untouchable caste. So this is a story of 200 years back, and she was married to Jyotirao Phule, okay, who educated her, okay, and these guys opened the schools for the girls and untouchables. So can you imagine that the girls were deprived, and especially people belonging to the untouchable caste, the girls were literally, deprived from education. And there are text in the Manusmriti, which is the law code of Hindu society, that says that you cannot learn and read Sanskrit, especially prescribed for the lower caste. So this is something that has the intersectional relationship between caste identity and gender. So Savitribai Phule is known as the mother of feminism in India because she is known for introducing girls into the education structure, right? Especially for the lower caste, and we owe her a lot for that. Later on, I think Dr. Ambedkar took the lead, who was very much socialist by his ideological tendencies, although he favored state socialism. But still, I mean, the case of Savitribai Phule and Fatima Sheikh, who was her colleague, tells a lot about the Hindu society, how they have been repressive of women getting education. So when you control the women, you control the society. So these are some patriarchal notions, caste, which is also one of the patriarchal notions. It is a state of mind, it is a monster, and it continues to haunt. So even today, you will find lower caste, community groups who are now able to access education thanks to Dr. Ambedkar, but we still have a long miles to go, Joel.
So you also mentioned other horrible things that happen as a result of the caste system, such as lynchings, murders, and social ostracization of lower castes for doing things such as drinking from public tank, sitting on a chair, riding a horse, flaunting a mustache, expressing their opinions, etc. How is it that these arbitrary and cruel practices continue to this day?
That's what, Joel. Even I am stunned. It's 21st century, and we still have these cases going on. And it's very unfortunate of the international media to not talk about it. So for modern diplomacy, which is a European edition, okay, I wrote one article for modern diplomacy, and I talked about that why is international community not talking about caste-based atrocities, right? All those so-called United Nations and all the international organizations have been talking about human rights. So why is that they are not able to acknowledge the caste-based atrocities? In 2001, that is 20 years back, at one of the UN convention meeting, I think somewhere in Durban in South Africa, only two countries, Guatemala and Switzerland, took India's stand, especially to make caste as a racist element, to count caste as an epithet as well. And Indian government interfered and says no, caste cannot be deemed as racism or as an epithet. But for the 3,000 years, there has been a castocide, just like a genocide. Why is that we're not talking about it? So I hope, Joel, through your show, more and more anarchists and Americans out there get to know about it. So, yeah, Joel, coming to answering your question specifically, just last week, there was this trend on Twitter, Suraj Mooch Rakhega, which means Suraj will keep his mustache. So, this guy, Suraj, belongs to a Dalit community, and he was beaten because he flaunted his mustache. He was thrashed and admitted to the hospital. So this is a notion of Brahminical patriarchy, okay? So this is something not new, and this is going to be there as long as caste is not annihilated. So, people sitting on a chair, drinking water from a public tank, riding a horse, even marrying outside your caste purview invites all this wrath. I'll come to the lynching part later, but let us talk about that why such kind of actions invite atrocities, it is because the upper caste cannot see the emancipation of the lower caste and they want to keep them pauperized. Because if the lower caste get educated, if they start doing things that the upper caste have been doing, then who will control whom? That is a question. So basically, through caste, you are getting the access to the capital of domination. And that's why you want to control the lower caste. So this is one of the way to look at it. Secondly, lynching. In last 7 years, the data says there has been an increment of hate crimes against minorities by 300%. Okay, this is not something avoidable. This is something very stunning. So Muslims and Dalits who do eat beef, especially the cow meat, the buffalo meat, they are lynched for it. The upper caste doesn't know that the ancient India consumed beef. The Myth of the Holy Cow by Professor D.N. Jha talks about it. Professor Kancha Ilyaya, who also talks about beef eating in ancient India, has been largely ignored in academics and the media. So beef or the cow is highly, worshipped in the Hindu religion for the religious reasons known. So during Buddha's era, Buddha and Mahavira, the Mahavira of Jain religion, they propagated ethics, they propagated fighting against animal sacrifice system, they propagated vegetarianism. So obviously it is the Brahminical society then, was resorting to animal sacrifice system or non-vegetarianism. And there are anthropological and archaeological evidences of ancient India consuming cow meat. And also in the mythological scenario, Lord Indra and few other gods have been consuming cow meat. So this has been all told in this book called Against the Grains. Okay, this is a very interesting book which is a must read to know about the violence in ancient India. So people in the current times, especially Muslims and Dalits, are more vulnerable to crimes. Okay, especially the mobocratic crimes. Right, we are seeing cases of lynchings. We are seeing how the government is also discriminatory against the Muslims and Dalits. So there was also this report by CDSS. For those who want to read it, can ping me on Twitter. I can help you get the access to this, where police has also been discriminatory against Muslims and Dalits. So this is all the notions of Brahminical patriarchy. Okay. So people transporting cow and buffalo or people even skinning a dead cow have been lynched. And this is something that the caste empowers the upper caste to do this. And this is something really prevailing in today's society, and it is highly unfortunate. I'm right now shivering to even talk about it, Joel.
So you cite a few notable cases of how upper caste Hindus have exported casteism abroad and continue their exploitation of lower castes in places such as America. Can you explain to listeners how and why this practice reaches beyond the borders of India?
So there's a quote by Dr. Ambedkar in this regard, who was born in an untouchable community and who has 18 graduated degrees in education. He's the highest learner, You can just look up his profile on Wikipedia. I'm pretty sure he will amaze you. So he says that wherever a Hindu goes, okay, just like a shadow, he carries along with him the caste. So in US, two notable cases, especially in California and New Jersey. Okay. So in California, there is a Silicon Valley, where you have this Cisco, okay, an organization where caste-based discrimination was practiced in its premises. Okay. So Dalit personnel, he was offended at politics against him because of his caste identity. And this issue was, not so widely reported. But then Equality Labs and other Students Association and other all those social activists based in California took up this issue. And Cisco had to introduce this particular work ethic policy in their programs that people also won't be discriminated on the basis of caste because US may have its so-called workspace environment making it eligible for people to have safe space for gender and class or maybe color racism, right? But then caste is also an act of racism, and For the first time, US also recognized the same. So that's one case. So coming to the another one that is in New Jersey, around 5,200 Dalits. Okay, they were all given a work contract to build a Hindu temple out there, and this was reported in the New York Times and Wall Street Journal. And this is something very recent which has happened 2 months back. So people on the contract out there, okay, especially they were imported from India and they all belonging to the lower caste. So they were working for more than 10 to 12 hours per day, okay, which is violation of human rights. On the other hand, they were also violating the minimum wage set by the New Jersey, and they were paid less than $1. So this is, economic discrimination on the basis of the caste, and this issue was highlighted, and later on it was, as usual, countered by the HEF, Hindu American Foundation, which is trying to whitewash the things of caste in US and trying to set a very positive image. But they are forgetting a quote by Buddha, you cannot hide three things for too long: sun, moon, and the truth. So this is something that lot many Americans know about it. I'm not sure how many Americans know where exactly is India. Even if you just go out, do and survey out there, I'm pretty sure not more than 50% would be able to identify geographically where India is located. So I think more and more Americans should be educated about caste. And I hope, Joel, your show really has a viral value on this and it really gets more ears to this particular issue.
Yeah, I hope so too. There's a section where you describe the process by which caste capitalism is rationalized by privileged castes. You quote sociologist Satish Deshpande, where they said, quote, by transforming their caste capital into modern capital, upper castes can now claim to be casteless and accuse lower castes of being illegitimate purveyors of caste. What does this mean?
This is very much contextual and relevant to talk about it. So whenever I call out the caste, okay, on social media or even in my professional life, the upper caste say, okay, we have moved on. Why you have not moved on? Caste is the matter of the past. So why are you still talking about caste when you have been given the representation, when you are already doing better? But then little do they know about their own ignorance, which is highly horrendous and vociferous. So Satish Deshpande makes a very important point out here. Okay, he is a must-read sociologist. So he says the upper caste, so far, with the help of their caste domination and with the access to financial capital, political capital, and other leverages, they have been able to successfully transform their caste capital into modern capital. Okay. But this is not the exact case with the people belonging to the lower caste who are still not able to transform the currency of their caste capital into modern capital. The upward caste have been using their caste as well as a class factor to mobilize to enhance themselves and their own community, whereas the lower caste is kept pauperized. And I highlighted the examples of manual scavenging, of crematorium, right? And there are many other such minuscule activities only to be done by the lower caste. So they often feel offended, and even some go to the extent of calling me Hinduphobic when I talk about the issue of caste. So they are rattled at the question when I raise about annihilation of caste. So Annihilation of Caste is also a book by Dr. Ambedkar in 1936. He wrote this book, okay, when he was invited in Lahore then to speak about caste factor. And looking at the script, the organizer canceled the event. So he made sure that his speech is transformed into a book. So that's a good book to be read about. So Satish, is has taken a cue somewhere from this factors. And the lower caste is, even today assumed to be talking about caste or to be carrying forward the issue of caste, but that's not the case, right? It's the upper caste who are still enjoying the monopoly over the caste factor or over the caste hierarchy and the structure. And we are being accused of being the purveyors of the caste, which is actually not the case. So basically, the upper caste are basically trying to politicize their situation and trying to radicalize us instead of de radicalizing themselves.
Mm-hmm. So this bleeds over into the political process also, right? You mentioned how the privileged castes suppress lower caste political representation. How does that work?
So, in 1950s, Dr. Ambedkar came out for political representation. Okay, he was of the view that political representation of the lower caste in the span of next 10 years will be good for the lower caste to enhance and emancipate themselves. But unfortunately, he closed his eyes forever in the year 1956. And after that, we saw a lot much politicization of representation. We even saw Mandal Commission in 1990s, which gave a huge chunk of pie to the other social group, which is far better than the lower caste. So today, when you talk about representations, okay, we have the general category, which is known as open category, and that is for the upper caste. We have OBC, which is other backward caste and class. Okay, it is basically for those who are in the middle of the upper caste and the lower caste, and they are doing far better than the lower caste. And then you have SC and ST, okay, scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, which enjoy a very lesser chunk of the pie when it comes to political representation or any public representation. So right now we do not have private representation. Okay, I would not use the word reservation because caste is the oldest form of reservation, where the upper caste has reserved what kind of birth or the occupation will be taken by the people of the other caste. So since 1950s, we are seeing affirmative action, which is a positive discrimination, and that's called representation. So even today, we do not have much representation, even in news channels, right? Even in education. So, even in IIT Kharagpur, I just released the data on my Twitter, and it was very stunning that the lower caste are still discouraged from applying for positions in public sector as well as in private sector. So this is altogether require a different podcast to talk about this because it's a very vast issue. But whatever I have told you is some important highlights that needs to be considered.
So, in your opinion, is Indian culture downstream from politics or the other way around?
Right now, the Indian politics is seeing the same thing that your nation saw it, right? You saw Donald Trump rise, Donald Trump's fall, but luckily you have some, sane politics out there to kick him out. Whereas in India, we have Narendra Modi, and he has been a very good to Donald Trump as well as Israel. So this current form of politics is really detrimental and perilous, and it's really turning out to be notorious for the lower social groups because caste has been consolidated like never before. You know, as I've highlighted all those cases, so the Indian politics is really in a very bad shape. You see how the pandemic is managed at our end. You see how the free speech is being suppressed. And you just check out the international ranking of India on free speech, environmental protection, human capital, democracy. Something really stunning. And this is something really bothering. And on human capital, I mean, it's really worse. Human capital or the development index is very much important to improve the standard of living. And you know it that the lower caste would be very much affected because of the downgrading of all this ranking, right? And somewhere I think we do not have the consciousness of introspection. So something that I envy you for kicking out Donald Trump.
Let's go into solutions and how you think we can unravel and abolish these problems. I was originally going to suggest how demystifying the practice of intercaste marriage might be a marginal improvement in the goal of abolishing the caste system, but as you said, anytime this happens, or a lot of the times when this happens, it's met with honor killings and things like that. So I won't ask you whether or not intercaste marriage will be an improvement, but I'll ask you instead, how do we move to a place where intercaste marriage is accepted?
That's a very important question, Joel, of our session. So, not all cases of intercaste are met with honor killings, especially those which are highly unprivileged, unfortunately, meets a very unlucky fate in this regard. So, intercaste marriage was also a solution propounded by Dr. Ambedkar, but he was not also fully convinced about it. So, intercaste marriage has the scope of destructuring and dismantling, or you can say disturbing the whole caste structure. When a person of lower caste marries a person of higher caste, irrespective of the gender, then I think somewhere you're contributing towards decentralization of this caste hierarchy and which will automatically get annihilated. So it requires incentives, right? And human beings are also determined by that particular economic factor and social factor. So, Joel, coming to this particular point, so intercaste marriage system can do a lot. Okay. And already the ratio is around 6% out of 1.3 billion of India's population, which is all the time low. In the coming time, we require more people to talk about intercaste, right? Unfortunately, in India, in the last span of 5 years, the culture of love jihad law. So, love jihad law is basically intended to discourage the interfaith marriage between Hindu and a Muslim. So, obviously, it will have ramifications on the intercaste marriage as well. And this is something not the government's business to decide whom I should marry or whom I should not. And love jihad law will control women more than the men, and it is intended at politicization against a particular religious group. So intercaste marriage is need of the hour. But unfortunately, Joel, there is a report by the Oxford University and Lok Foundation where urbanites, people living in the metropolitan cities of India like Mumbai, Chennai, Delhi, Bangalore, they still prefer the way their grandparents married. And the grandparents obviously are conventional and traditional by their nature. So they are basically conservatives and the preservers of the traditional values. And only 3% of the urbanites prefer marrying their own way. Otherwise, most of them are still marrying the way their grandparents did. So, endogamy, which is an intra-caste or an arranged marriage system, it is basically arrangement of the caste. Okay, so marrying in the same caste will not make any difference, right? It just strengthens the caste structure, whereas intercaste would be actually weakening the whole base of it. Although, we have a long way to go in this, so we need to have critical as well as social consciousness in this regard so that we get more people talking about it. Like, why are we fearing to love openly? Why are we fearing to kiss openly when we are not fearing to lynch openly, or when we are not fearing or shying to urinate openly? That's a very sarcastic way to put. And this is what Indian society has been up to. And the other way to talk about solution would be to talk about Phule and Ambedkar, okay, as a methodology. They are not just personalities, they are consciousness as well at the same time. And in my blog, especially in the end, I talk about them, that we require them to have been introduced in the education system, but you will not have them in education system because the education system is dominated by the upper caste. So why would upper caste have any incentive to introduce Phule and Ambedkar in the curriculum? So as a professor based in Mumbai, I talk about this in my class by evading the lesson plans. So lesson plans are like regulated markets of education and knowledge. And as an agorist, I create a black market of knowledge information flow, and it is important for students to know about it because they need to have interdisciplinary experience of looking at social realities, including caste factor, and they should be able to disown it, because caste is not just in your jati or the varna. Caste is also on your food, right? The upper caste can easily call themselves vegan or vegetarianism, and they can practice it openly, right? So this is one of the example that Satish Deshpande talks about, and which you have raised it rightfully, that now they can claim to be casteless. But then why so? That is because caste is also in the food, right? So the upper caste want to promote and enforce vegetarianism. So it's not for the lower caste who can easily afford vegetarianism, right? And eating non-vegetarian food has also been historic. It has also been cultural in Indian context. So this is something, which is really stunning. And I'll tell you an example. There's an NGO, Akshaya Patra, okay, which offers a midday meal scheme in the government schools for the school students. They have excluded egg, garlic, and onion from the diet. And this is a very important nutritional element required for the growth of the school kids, right? So why is that the government is tendering out to certain particular religious NGO and they are trying to enforce this? This is not something that I'm cooking on my own. This is something which is proven, and I have evidence to talk about it.
You've mentioned them a few times, but Dr. Ambedkar, who is the architect of the Indian Constitution and a staunch advocate of anti casteism, as you said, was of the view that caste is not just a division of labor, but also a division of laborers. Do you agree with this perspective? And that begs the question, what role could labor organizing play in tearing apart the caste system?
So yeah, Joel, I mean, in 2015, for this organization based in Canada, OFMI, Organization for Minorities of India, I wrote a blog, okay, that about the libertarian side of Dr. Ambedkar, okay, because I was a hardcore, libertarian then. So there is this particular side, and if you read Dr. Ambedkar's thesis, okay, on the problems of rupee, you will find lot much Frederick Hayek kind of tendencies in him. But let us not get much into political philosophy now. But coming to this particular point, caste is not just a division of labor, but a division of laborers. As discussed so far, we have come to this particular understanding that caste divides you on the basis of birth, okay, because it is religiously prescribed, and on the basis of occupation. So when it comes to the occupation, you are not just divided on the basis of your labor value, but also on the work or the kind of activities that you do. So certain activities are respected and appreciated, especially the ones belonging to the upward class and the caste. Whereas the occupation undertaken by the lower caste is looked down upon. In fact, they are the very important kind of activities, right? They are the unsung heroes. And these unsung heroes are not properly recognized. So this caste is responsible for dividing people not on the basis of their occupation, but on the basis of work position that they hold. And that is why Dr. Ambedkar has also been quite passionate about labor laws. In fact, all these initial stages of the labor laws in India, especially in modern India after India winning independence from the British Empire, it was Dr. Ambedkar who has made labor laws much more better. Otherwise, we were all at the mercy of the capitalistic tendencies. So, caste structure or caste hierarchy is almost like the capitalism model. It's almost like a nepotistic model, right? So, a Brahmin son will become a Brahmin priest, but a Dalit son will not become a Brahmin priest, irrespective of his efficiency. So, this is something that division of labor and specialization, which Adam Smith and other free market economists talked about it, which I think is very essential for a society to grow because it enhances mutual cooperation and voluntary exchange. But unfortunately, the caste determines the kind of profession. But however, in recent times, there has been a good amount of development of the Dalits to go for higher education, right? There are some notable thinkers, notable writers, notable activists, notable politicians as well who have done well in their profession, right? All thanks to Dr. Ambedkar, who has made the representation easily accessible. But however, we have a long mile to go to even reform them. So it is not possible, from the solution part, which Dr. Ambedkar also realized that Hinduism cannot be reformed internally, and it is not able to even produce a Voltaire. So we all know Voltaire, right? The French philosopher. But in this case, he created an alternate system rather than wasting time to reform Hindu society. He came to this conclusion that it's better to walk out from this particular religion that continues to degrade our labor.
Right, right. Education and growing awareness of these issues are going to be important in combating the ideology of casteism also. In the article, you point out how Dr. Ambedkar is known for challenging Mahatma Gandhi's, who is the father of modern India. He's known for challenging Gandhi's support for the caste system or justification of caste-based manual scavenging. Gandhi was supposed to be some type of anarchist, so this position seems obviously unjustified and awkward at best, right? Are you familiar with his reasoning behind his support for the caste system, and how did Dr. Ambedkar challenge his support?
So, I would call Gandhi as Gandhi because calling him Mahatma is a title, is given to the one who is a great soul. So, I understand that Gandhi was an anarcho syndicalist. He found state to be manifesting violence and oppression, but Dr. Ambedkar caught Gandhi on many occasions to be contradicting himself. So Gandhi in Gujarati newspaper talks against caste, and in English newspaper he supports caste, and that is what Dr. Ambedkar has found. Okay, a simple research can tell anyone about it. Even when I was a libertarian, when I was new to the idea of libertarian, Gandhi's ideas on state, okay, on labors, really impressed me. But when I looked at Gandhi from Ambedkar's lens, it changed my whole perspective. Gandhi was a defender of the Chatuvarna system, that is a caste structure system. And in 1936, he even wrote an article, defending manual scavenging, calling it as one of the spiritual activity. So, how is cleaning human excreta or the dry excreta with your own hands a spiritual activity? I have not understood this. So Gandhi, somewhere being an anarcho syndicalist, is actually disrespecting the whole theory of syndicalism or laborism. And Dr. Ambedkar was actually indirectly, or you can say politically, blackmailed by Gandhi. So there is this 1931-32 Pune Pact. Okay, Pune is a place near Mumbai, 3 hours from here. So Dr. Ambedkar wanted separate electoral system for the untouchables or for the depressed class, that is Dalits and Bahujans. He was of the view that a separate electorate system will be able to successfully look after the political and the social issues of the lower caste. So a separate electorate system would be like having a separate elections or a separate constituencies where you will have the lower caste leader being appointed by the lower caste community. Otherwise, in general election system, we have this upper caste dominating the political sphere who are least likely to represent the issues of the lower caste. Gandhi feared that this will create further division in the Hindu society because he believed that the lower caste have an obligation to serve the upper caste. So Gandhi went on fast, unto death kind of strike, and Dr. Ambedkar had to give up this idea and he signed the Pune Pact. Although Gandhi complimented Ambedkar on many occasions, but then that doesn't serve the purpose. I would say the real father of modern India is Dr. Ambedkar, and he's the real Mahatma, not the Gandhi. People should read about Gandhi. In Ghana, in Africa, Gandhi statues have been taken down because he favored racism. Look at his views on black people, in that those particular epoch. You yourself, Joel, would be shocked.
Oh, yeah. All right. So here's a big question that is often a default position within anarchism, and that's the instinct that we can't abolish systems of oppression fully without, at minimum, abolishing the state. Not that systems of oppression can't perpetuate without the state, but that state abolition is a necessary component towards that goal. So my question is, can we abolish the caste system without abolishing the state?
That's a very tactical question. That's something very, very intelligent of you to ask me this. So, known that Gandhi was an anarchist, but yeah, I mean, we cannot have a society which is completely anarchic. Although all of us are anarchists when we are acting out of our own agencies, as long as government doesn't interfere in our choices and volition. Dr. Ambedkar was a state socialist. He was not an anarchist. He, in fact, feared anarchism. But I think the lower caste are likely to fear anarchism because in a completely anarchic society, the upper caste will eventually have the monopoly on the laws and the guns, and they will eventually do the oppression. So I can say, Joel, in simple words, that there is an intersectional relationship between caste and governance as well. If you look at Dalit activists or ask for their lens on this political system, we all identify India's democracy as Brahminical democracy. It is a democracy of and for the Baniyas and the Brahmins. So the Baniyas are the traders who are crony capitalists who share very close relations with the Brahmins. So to abolish caste is to also abolish first the idea that you are submitting yourself to someone. You require a complete self autonomy over your life, liberty, and your choices. It all starts with your state of mind. Caste exists because We pay obedience to the system of caste. Dr. Ambedkar walked out. He created Navayana Buddhism, which is fourth wheel of Buddhism, like all other traditional means. This is something very unconventional, and he talks more about the social and the political progress. He found refuge in Buddhism because he wanted to abolish the caste structure of Hinduism by making people, especially the Hindu Dalits, leave the Hindu structure and join Navayana Buddhism, which is an alternate to the state oppression or the social oppression. So, to abolish the state, which will be about annihilation of sovereignty. If I voice out few more opinions about it, Joel, I'll be arrested next morning. And India is very good in sedition cases, The British has got all this. And India today has the highest amount of sedition cases, although the conviction rate is low. So, to talk about abolition of state, first requires abolition of caste, because when the caste is abolished and annihilated, which is really a challenging task, automatically the Brahminical state will be, disempowered. So, if we directly attack the idea of state, that doesn't guarantee the annihilation of caste,
Hmm.
because caste comes before the state.
Okay. Yeah, that was a fascinating response, and I appreciate you expounding on that. We have a couple listener questions that I'd like to ask you, and then we can move to the end of our conversation. Is that cool?
Yeah, Joel, seems legit. So far, so good.
All right, great. So the first listener question is, which comes from Twitter, is if there were something to be tweaked in the Constitution to further protect the rights of those oppressed or to keep a check on caste-based oppression, what would it be?
So, we first have to do a lot of homework on understanding the constitutional rights. If you just take a distinction between the negative rights and the positive rights, I think caste is something that cannot be just tackled with the political rights, because caste has been more social, right? And that's why the title of my article has been social statism called caste rather than political statism called caste. So maybe we can talk about having separate electorates, but I think in current context, even the Dalit leaders who are in political sphere won't be willing to talk about separate electorates because it's controversial, it's seditious, and at the same time, in India, people don't cast their vote; they cast their vote. There is a huge difference between CAST and CASTE out here, Joel. So we have to understand that you cannot solve this problem with the same consciousness that gave birth to this. Just like how you have agorism in economics tackling the regulated markets, you have anarchism coming out because the state becomes repressive and the democide happens. So the caste is an act of genocide. It is an ethnocide, for 3,000 years. Political solutions cannot alone solve the problem. I think you require more and more people to talk about separate electorates if you're really wanting a political solution. Because the upper caste do not have the incentive to look after the lower caste, and why would they? Why would they want upliftment of the lower caste? It will dismantle their own religion, and it has been religiously justified. If you look at the second para of the article, I talked about the religious justification given by a Brahmin priest who is openly justifying this act. So there is lot much homework that has to be done, and I think we cannot expect the upper caste to give up the caste. It is wastage of time. We cannot expect them to do it, and if they want to do it, they can start on their own on realization of the collective consciousness and by becoming a collective suicide, cultural suicide bomber. So they have to bomb their own culture first, not to be taken literally, so that the lower caste can heave a sigh of relief, then they can be free on their own. Otherwise, it's
Hmm.
really troublesome to have them.
Yeah. Okay, so the second listener question is, we see the rise of propaganda Brahmanism in the name of Sua. So how will we counter them?
So, Brahminism has been propagating an agenda against lower caste since years, right? So, Buddhism and Jainism came to counter the Brahminism. Even in last 600 years, Sikhism also countered Brahminism. So, Brahminism is a social genetic issue. And what is Brahminism? It is the tendency of enforcing caste, it is the tendency of sustaining the social hierarchy, and to refute it, If you try to create a propaganda, they will create a counter narratives to it, and they have all the tools and instrument to fire back at us. So I think this particular movement, if we do it openly, it will have a backfiring effect. So the issue starts with Dr. Ambedkar's quote: educate, organize, and agitate. And that is mostly for our own community first. You educate your own people, you organize them, and then you agitate. But however, in today's time, Brahminism, cannot be so easily refuted. In fact, Hindutva has consolidated Brahminism like never before. There was this report. I forgot the name of the report, but it was about Facebook, tolerating hate speech. 40% of the content on Facebook is completely against Dr. Ambedkar, as well as having casteist and racist slurs against Dalits and Bahujans. I'm pretty sure if the report is renewed, the percentage is likely to increase. So you see the propaganda against reservation, you see the propaganda in favor of Hindutva. So basically, this is to maintain the caste structure.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for the thoughtful response on that and for the thoughtful responses on all of the questions that we've explored today. I've found this personally to be extremely fascinating. I learned a lot from you, and I'm looking forward to learn even more. And you've opened up a new curiosity for me, and I hope that others have also been inspired by the things you've said and continue to learn more about it and try to find ways to assist in the abolition of the caste system in India. Where should folks go to learn more about the issues we've discussed today?
Yeah, Joel, I'm very much glad and obliged to you, for this podcast. It was unexpected. I remember submitting my article to C4SS. It was the very first time. I've been knowing C4SS on Facebook. And at that time, I was an anarcho-capitalist. But yeah, you guys got good amount of resources. And I think C4SS should have a separate features on caste. You should have all the resources and the literature on caste. I can help you link with those for free. And, Joel, I really enjoyed talking to you. But one thing, all the things that I've talked about, all those keywords that I've used, all the statements can be simply learned through Google search. If not, the listeners can connect with me on Twitter. I can help them connect. And if not, if they want to get into books, I think in the article I have suggested some books that they can read. And I think these are some beginning books for them to evaporate themselves into a newer dimension of learning about caste and the anti-caste consciousness at the same time, Joel.
Great, thank you. Yeah, go ahead and send me those links if you want, all the sources that you have. And if you do, I'll be sure to include them in the show notes, okay?
Sure, Joel. Thanks a lot. I'll do the needful.
Yeah, absolutely. So where should folks go to follow you and your work?
Yeah, I'm not active on Facebook. 2 years back, the current ruling party had its own IT cell, and I was attacked for my views. So I have left Facebook, and we all saw how Facebook has compromised with the current dispensation in India. There was a report by Wall Street Journal that Facebook tolerates hate speech videos in India thanks to the current government in power. So I can be easily connected on Twitter, and I'm very much approachable on Twitter. You can just find me at Jaimism. Okay, it's not a political philosophy yet, just adding ism to my name. So yeah, I'll tweet you back at Jaimism. Yeah, it will be fun to interact, Joel.
Great. All right, Jaimine, is there anything I forgot to ask you that you'd like to touch on before we end the interview? Any last words about any of this?
Nothing else, Joel. I really admire you doing a good work, and I'm really happy that C4SS, just shot back a mail that you are inviting me for the podcast here. I never thought that I'll be on C4SS podcast, but yeah, Joel, you really have a good voice. You really have a good amount of intelligence, and I really admire you. And I hope you all the best for all the future endeavors for your podcast. Stay safe.
Jaimine, that's very flattering. I feel the same about you. And yeah, like I said, I'm sure I've got a lot that I could learn from you more than the other way around. But that's very sweet of you to say. I appreciate that. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me. It's been an honor.
Same here, Joel. Wish you and your loved ones the very best, and also C4SS. Thank you for being there. I hope it was a very brainy and very heavy session. with a lot of much data and facts.
It was. All right, Jamie. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Sure, Joel. Thank you.